Hey, how's that going? All right, so I'm going to start with a little interactive visual piece, auditory as well. So it may feel a little disorienting, but that's okay. Let's embrace this feeling together.
What does it mean to be a designer? Are we meant to push boxes around a page in the hopes of achieving more clicks for products? Are we meant to contribute to the rising peak of landfills? Is it to drive sales for these products so we can stand upon mountain-high piles of plastic junk shipped next day from retail marketplaces across the globe? Are we meant to make beautiful and elegant word marks for fast fashion brands that care little about the longevity of their products? How many seltzer brands does the world really need? I suppose if you add some gin and pineapple, we can differentiate the perceived brand value and dominate your competition. Or maybe we're just selling fizzy water that actually isn't that special. I'm not sure what the role of a designer plays in today's society, but I'm sure it isn't the superficial role many of us do play. Design thinking most certainly has a better place in this world beyond pandering to algorithms and data-hungry billionaires. How do we fight a growing battle between the prevalence of artificial musicians and the rising changes in the arts? I don't think that's an answer. I'm not sure
All right, did you catch all that? Because there's going to be a quiz later. So are we feeling a little disoriented? That's okay. Like I said, let's embrace that. So there are moments in life where we feel like truly sort of aligned with our environments in our life, and we kind of understand exactly where we're going. Then there were those other moments in life where we're like collapsing under to-do lists. We have a bunch of unanswered emails. We don't really know how to navigate the world, and we kind of feel like we're getting lost. So in those difficult moments, how do we stay passionate about creativity? Sorry, I'm going to read off my phone because if I don't, I'll ramble for like 2 hours and we'll be here all night. So in those difficult moments, how do we stay passionate about creativity? And even further, what happens when the world throws you unexpected challenges? So in 2023, I faced a familiar feeling, disorientation. After almost 20 years battling really challenging anxiety and depression, I was handed a late ADHD diagnosis. While this set me on a new path of healing, it left me feeling equally disoriented. So let me rewind a little bit. So I'm Jared Lebel, as you heard before. I'm an artist first, a designer second, musician third, and a human being always. So I truly believe that our human existence comes first before any other part of our existence, and that's kind of part of my designer career narrative, I guess, and my struggle with my current career situation. So this is me as a baby. I have no thoughts yet. It's great. It's liberating. I don't know anything about the world. I'm feeling great. You know, I could poop my pants. Nobody gives me shit. So I don't know this yet, but I'm going to love creativity. And eventually I'm going to become a creative professional, a brand designer to be exact. So I grew up in a pretty large family. Lots of creative people were in my family as well. You can see my dad and my mom there. My dad's actually in the back of the room too, if you want to give him a high five later. So most of my family weren't really concerned with the status quo. We were all kind of like fun-loving, you know, rough around the edges, easygoing. I was surrounded by fun-loving French Canadians on my dad's side and food-loving Portuguese immigrants on my mom's side. Many were artists, some musicians, and some of them inspired me from a very young age to pave my own path, and that was especially my parents. So this is my mom, Lena. She wasn't much of a creative herself, but coming from a creative family, she knew how important creativity can be for some. So she encouraged all of my bizarre and questionable hobbies and interests, and reluctantly empowered me to do what I love, no matter how bizarre or frightening it was for her. She was and still is my rock, and she supports me still to this day on all the bizarre and crazy things that I come across, or the weird ideas that I have about my career and myself. So, and then this is my dad. A little bit younger than he is today, but in his glory days, some would say. So him and his brothers had a metal band, and they were all pretty creative, and I thought it was pretty cool that they looked and sounded like Black Sabbath mixed with Judas Priest. One day I imagined that I would also be wearing a leather bracelet on stage with my band, and to some extent I actually did that at one point. So my father's curious and smart, and he always encouraged me to understand the world with depth and be inquisitive. He showed me that you could pursue your interests without succumbing to the pressures of others' opinions. He was unfiltered, raw, And I think that influenced me from a very young age. So when I was about 6 years old, my parents decided that they would separate. I was devastated. My 6-year-old brain couldn't really understand the reasons. All I knew at the time was that my dad was leaving, and my world was kind of shook, and I didn't really comprehend the adult, reasons behind that. So I think I matured a little bit faster that day. I probably added a few years onto my maturity level, and it gave me sort of a new perspective on life and started to give me this inquisitive sort of mindset that I think I carried forward. So the first time in my child life, I felt a new feeling that was difficult to comprehend. I felt a deep sense of disorientation. It was a new and intense feeling. The first time I experienced pain, I truly just couldn't control or understand. I missed my father, and the years that would follow would become increasingly more and more challenging for me. So after the divorce, I experienced a few more disorienting years, and I think as I started to mature and grow into sort of the teenage years and understand sort of more mature and adult problems, I started to struggle a little bit more and feel more alien and disoriented throughout my life. And as I started to approach my teenage years and stuff, I kind of started struggling with my anxieties and my depression. I started feeling more alienated and started alienating myself through sort of just that feeling of not really knowing where to place myself in the world. So I was bored by everything and feeling increasingly like an alien. I spent most of my days doodling in the margins of my notebooks and escaping life through drawing. Eventually, I found community through alternative subcultures. So it was finally nice to be surrounded by weird people just like me with peculiar interests and sort of that alien feeling as well. So we could sort of connect on that sort of shared alien and sort of outcast vibe, I guess. So I found a group of misfits that I could sort of be aligned with. So I spent most of my free time diving deeper into abrasive music that helped me feel anchored, and I soon moved from my sketchbooks towards bands and mosh pits. So at first, I felt like I wasn't alone in these settings. I found people as peculiar as me, and I could be my weird self around them. But that wouldn't last for long. I was becoming more aware of the responsibilities of adulthood. I feared a boring life confined by the status quo, and I became a more recluse and afraid of the future. Creativity once grounded me, but I'd soon abandon it to fill my emptiness with bad habits. So at age 13, I tried cannabis, started exploring magic mushrooms, and then my curiosity got the best of me, and by 19, I was using cocaine pretty regularly. And outside of cocaine, I was pretty much using any substance I could get my hands on. So I was escaping pain and rejecting the disorientation. Disorientation was trying to teach me something, and I was rejecting it, so I just wasn't listening. So around 2003, I lost control of these habits, and I experienced a minor overdose at a really embarrassing time in my life. I had really no interest in being alive anymore. I was a self-destructive degenerate and alienating myself from the world, my parents, my family, my friends. And on a subconscious level, I hope I would eventually fade away, to be honest. Oops. So slightly after my close call, my family intervened, and they gave me a compassionate ultimatum. With their support, I needed to make this right, or I needed to find a new place to call home. So I decided to make it right because I no longer wanted to experience this pain and isolation. So I basically took it upon myself to visit a psychiatrist. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety, persistent depression, and I started on medication to sort of put myself on a path of healing. So I was still pretty hopeless and desperate at this point, but I was starting to feel better, and I was getting myself healthier and sort of finding my ground, and I knew I had to try something drastic. So I decided I would just basically move to Montreal. I would study audio engineering, and I would see what would happen. I knew I wanted to pursue a creative life. I didn't really know what it was. I had kind of abandoned drawing. I wasn't really doing any visual arts at that time. But I always had a guitar in my hands, and I explored drawing and recording, and I was a drummer and all that kind of stuff. So I said, fuck it, let's try it. So I moved to Montreal. I studied audio engineering. And I didn't know it yet, but this would sort of start my design career in a very subtle way. I was already using Photoshop, designing posters and like album art for my bands and stuff, but it wasn't really a world that I like knew about. And to me, I was just like, I draw. I'm not really a designer. I don't know what that is. So I didn't really think there was a career in like t-shirts and stuff like that. So I decided I would study music. So after I moved back from school to Ottawa, I began to produce music and DJ. I used to throw raves in Ottawa. So for about 4 years, I would basically just throw events and spend my nights in bars. So I had some success, but not much. I was really good at being creative, but terrible at doing anything that I was supposed to be doing. So I worked odd jobs and hung out in bars and made music all the time. It was fun, but I didn't feel any less hopeless, and I must admit, raves aren't the best place for an ex-addict to be. So sure enough, I fell into old habits, and I lost my way for some time again. But as serendipity would have it, I was making promotional materials for my events, and I would begin a love-hate relationship with my current career. I was learning how to market on social media. I was learning how to design more effectively. As you can see, I was obviously a prodigy. So I was learning more about the world of design, and it seemed like something I could probably pursue. So we can take a nice look at some of these awful posters that I designed when I was like maybe 22 years old. So by the age of 23, I admitted I couldn't control myself surrounded by temptations. So my anxiety was coming back with a vengeance, and I was becoming depressed and worried about my future. Music just really wasn't doing it. I wasn't making a living, and obviously the temptations of that environment weren't really good for me. So I finally embraced my disoriented feeling, and I let it sort of guide me. What I mean is I had no idea what to do, so I tried something. So my life partner at the time was considering going to design school, and my mom and her encouraged me to give it a shot. I reluctantly submitted the worst portfolio in the history of Algonquin College, and for some reason they accepted me. It was truly bad. So to my surprise, design school changed my life. All I wanted to do was graphic design from that point for the rest of my life. I found a whole world of creativity that I didn't really fully understand existed. I love comics and drawing and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't really understand the breadth of what I could do with art visually. And I didn't really think I was good at drawing to be like an animator or anything like that. Like, I'm really good with a pen tool. I can trace some stuff. I can draw like some really shitty art and stuff, and it's good for design, but I couldn't draw a comic book. So I sunk my teeth in day and night, and by graduation, we had built a steady flow of clients and a big network, which propelled me into some deeply oriented years. So in 2015, I co-founded SALT. It was an incredibly pivotal moment in my life. That alien feeling was as distant as it ever was, and I really enjoyed the work. I was still struggling with the disease, but I was sober and happier than ever, and I was doing work that I really enjoyed. So we were making an impact in our community. I was living as a creative, and I was making a living doing it. We got to work on some really great projects with some really great people. We found rapid success, and people hired us for the work we wanted to do. What more could a creative ask for? So our studio lasted for close to 4 years, but soon enough, the future began to blur, and I started to feel that familiar feeling again. I started to feel disoriented and unsure of the future, and sure enough, I would find myself searching for answers again. So eventually, my romantic relationship ended. We were both burnt out and experiencing fewer exciting moments, and after some deep reflection, we ended our romantic relationship. We ran SALT platonically for a little while, but we had to let it go, and eventually we did. So with heavy hearts, we called it quits and went our own ways professionally. Once again, I was disoriented, but this time grieving a relationship, the loss of my business, and then the fabric of society began to unravel. The pandemic happened. So for a couple short months, I went from the most oriented I've ever felt to the most disoriented I think I've ever felt. It was a moment where like the whole rug was swept from underneath me. I was like, I don't want to go take a job. I just want to design for people, do it on my own time, on my own terms. But I was extremely burnt out, depressed, a little bit disenchanted with design. And we were in a pandemic, so everything was getting increasingly digital. I'm not really the most fond of digital design, so obviously the future was looking a little bit hazy for myself. So as time went on, I freelanced and I fumbled around aimlessly for some time, but I became pretty disenchanted with the design industry. I didn't really know what to do next, and certainly didn't want a design job, but I was tired and I was kind of like falling out of love with design, and I didn't really know where to go next. I was kind of considering school. I was kind of considering all different options, so I was a bit lost at this point in my life. So again, this disoriented feeling was telling me something, but this time I was a little bit better at listening. So I came across an opportunity to join a growing tech company. I was becoming more disillusioned with the world and unsure about my next moves. So I decided to push myself outside of my comfort zone and gasp, take a full-time job. So I really do like carving my own path, but I was tired, I was depressed, and I was super hopeless. So I suspected something drastically different might just be the change that I needed. So my friend Jake, who's on the right-hand side, your left-hand side, he posted on his story that his company, or the company that he was working for, was looking for a brand designer. So I reached out to him, and sure enough, got a couple interviews, and then shortly after that, I became the first brand designer at Perpetua. So about 2 years later, I was managing a team of 3 designers and leading a global brand at a software company. So it was pretty fun at the time, and it was exciting for sure. So there's supposed to be an illustration here, but I do have ADHD, and when I sent the presentation, I forgot to put it in here. So let's just laugh at that, I guess. So as I grew into my role, I felt oriented. I embraced this new challenge just like any other. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I was learning a lot. I liked working with a team and not feeling alone like freelance can often feel. And I was watching this company grow, and I was kind of watching my contribution help the company grow. So it was pretty nice, and it was fun for a while. So I started to notice a pattern. Whenever I felt disoriented, great and exciting opportunities presented themselves. And when I said yes to them and embraced change, I felt less disoriented. But I was naive to think it was that simple. So for some time, like I said, it was great. My mind was feeling healthy, and I enjoyed the work. But by year 2, I experienced the deepest and most unrelenting burnout of my career. And again, I felt disoriented. But this time it was a little bit different. My medication wasn't really helping anymore. I was having daily panic attacks. I devoted my life to work, but I still couldn't manage my workload and balance my personal life. Essentially, I had no energy outside of work. And I was tremendously burnt out, void of any passion, and rapidly losing interest in the career I once loved. So I was dealing with some pretty dark thoughts at this time in my life, like pretty scary ones. So I spent many days staring at Figma and Creative Cloud through tear-filled eyes. I kerned while taking deep breaths to calm my nerves, and I prototyped mock-ups with disdain for an increasingly digital world that seemed as lost as me. In other words, I was super depressed, I was lost, I hated my job, and I was just waking up every day miserable. Okay, so we're pretty much caught up at this point. So I recently left Perpetua, and we're about to get into some of the disorienting and orienting situations in my life that have come up. So about 6 months ago, I received a late ADHD diagnosis. So a busy brain, impulsivity, hyperenergy, it was always ADHD. So my anxiety and my depression is actually a secondary symptom of having ADHD. So the busyness in my brain was never anxiety. The anxieties were a secondary symptom of that, and I was really struggling to quiet the noise in my brain. So going undiagnosed meant that my anxiety and depression had all these years to sort of thrive inside my mind. So as I learned more about my new diagnosis and started new therapies and medications, I began making more sense of who I was. This new clarity made me realize I was on the wrong path, but I'd been too overwhelmed to fully grasp my feelings and definitely didn't have enough energy to do anything about it. I lost touch with myself, so I was feeling lost because I didn't really know who I was or what I needed out of life. So with this new clarity, I made the very difficult choice to resign as the brand lead at Perpetua and made a commitment to myself to rediscover who I was and use the disorientation as an opportunity to look at my career with a fresh perspective. Thank you. So at this point, if I'm being pretty honest, I wanted to do anything but graphic design. Like I literally just wanted to close my computer, walk into the woods, and just keep walking and like find a pine cone and sleep next to it. So I'd become increasingly disenchanted with the industry I once loved. I no longer saw a place for me in it, but I was determined to find my place again. So I was afraid to be myself because I fucked up so much in life that when I started to find success, I felt that if I acted perfect, that one time that I did fuck up, people would sort of like forgive me, right? So I basically made it a point to never fuck up. And I sort of masked myself. I hid all these disorganized and anxious ideas that I had in my head. I sort of like hid all this negativity that I housed. And I essentially thought that would sort of mask myself enough that people would just think I'm normal and then I would fit in and feel better. But sure enough, I was making myself more sick. So I worked hard not to fail, and I made myself sick doing it, but I was on a new mission to change that. So I started noting different ideas that I came across in therapy and life, and I began to explore different ways to express myself. I wanted to reject the corporate world that I'd abandoned and get disoriented in hopes of finding new answers. So the result was a short-lived poster project that was filled with like gritty texture. I abandoned modern design principles and sort of rejected everything I'd become as a designer. And I wanted to break free of that like mental confine that I'd built up for myself. So like obviously we're in a room full of designers. We live in grids. We live in organization, hierarchy and stuff. And I kind of wanted to get rid of that and get back to like the paper scraps of the glory days of graphic design, get messy with things. I was doing it in a digital capacity, but I was forgetting about all the notions I had built up. So my new goal was absolutely to find out who I was, to rediscover myself and understand the complexity of my mental illness. So I wanted to focus this project on introspection and use it sort of as somewhat of a visual journal. I rejected external influence and started to find meaning in design again. I reminded myself that design can be meaningful and help people feel better, even if it's just a simple poster. So some of these are exploring some of the ideas that I was sort of dealing with in therapy and learning about ADHD and neurodivergence. And neurodivergence is complex and intense, and we often feel like there's more to life and that we're being sort of burdened by the confines of the status quo and everything. And I was really feeling that in a corporate environment, so I wanted to break out of that, and a lot of these posters explored that. So I was struggling, obviously, working in a tech company that was built on AI, and I work from home, and pretty much have worked from home all my career. And I came across a tweet that Elon Musk basically said working from home was morally wrong after he laid off everybody at Twitter. So I decided to turn him into a clown and, say that he was morally wrong. So I was using these posters to sort of laugh and reject the ideas that the design world was telling me I should embrace. I don't think we all have to embrace everything. There's a place for everybody. And I kind of wanted to show the world that. I made this poster while I was still at Perpetua, and I'm pretty sure some of my colleagues didn't love it. And again, with technology playing an increasingly bigger role with my disdain for the industry, I decided to use artificial intelligence to create an image of a homeless robot to sort of think about what if we took their jobs. So he's begging for change because a human took his job. So this artificial intelligence is poor now. So it came to a point where I really wanted to reject all modernity and start over. I felt really depressed, and I felt depressed at this notion because I'm not good at much else, so I didn't really know what to do. But being creative was not really doing it for me. So this project was kind of helping me blossom and kind of break out of that mold and find my passion again. And as you can see, I was dealing with some pretty negative thoughts at this point. I was like, I just didn't want to be around anybody. And that's probably where I'd find my pine cone to fall asleep next to. But eventually, I did eventually I did start finding some inner peace with this poster project, and I started to understand myself a little bit better. And I started to understand that, like, disorientation, when I'm feeling that, maybe I need to focus less on controlling that feeling and, let go of some things and let this feeling sort of guide me through life. So as I journaled and explored these ideas, as I got them out of my brain, I began to understand my place in design and make sense of things again. So we often have choices in life, like the choice to embrace disorientation or let the disorientation guide us to oblivion. So I was beginning to recognize that, yes, these moments of disorientation are difficult, but they often lead to new and wonderful places and a deeper level of clarity. So every time I became disoriented, the next attempt at orientation was easier and the outcome better. So through all of this, I realized it was only me making these choices. It was me allowing me to remain sad. Yes, I struggled with the disease, but my inability to let go of things that did not serve me was the only thing holding me back. I quit my job, I kind of rejected everything, and I let go of everything that wasn't serving me, and through that, I was starting to find my place in design again. Thank you. So this was actually the last post that I posted. It was super short-lived because after 8 posts, I was like, I'm bored of this, and that's very ADHD. So, but I did about 8 posters, and then by the last one, I was like, you know what? I think I'm ready, and I'm going to quit my job. So this was kind of like an acknowledgement of my evolution, my permission to be messy and make mistakes again. So I posted it, and about a week later, I resigned at Perpetua. And then I started my studio, and I started, freelancing again, and immediately it was pretty good. Thank you, I appreciate that. So this whole talk is kind of a call to action to you to embrace disorientation, because is anybody truly oriented? Do we need to be? I don't think so. I think we need to recalibrate as we go, because things are going to change. The world is going to change. We're going to change. I'm almost 40 and I have few answers, and the more I ask, the less I know. Maybe we're not meant to be oriented all the time. Right now, I'm certainly not. I have no idea what I want to do tomorrow. I design every day despite an ongoing lack of enthusiasm. I go to therapy even though it feels like a chore. I quit my job even though it was frightening, and a lot of people told me not to. And the more I look for answers, the more I try to understand the human condition, the more I realize that most people are just as disoriented as me. And you know what? That makes me feel a little less disoriented and alone. Thank you.